Escape from Butcher Bay is one of the rare games that's both a movie tie-in and one of the best games in 2004. A very loaded year in fact, with games like Half-Life 2, Halo 2, and even Doom 3 coming out of the woodworks. With such a good variety of different gameplay narratives, the FPS genre was eaten real good that year. So when Starbreeze Studios decided to throw their take on an FPS experience, which was their first actually, a lot of fans were extremely pleased. Butcher Bay essentially plays like an FPS adventure where shooting wasn't just the sole focus of its gameplay. It had a good variety of mixed elements that made the game feel like more than just your typical shooter, very much akin to games like Half-Life, where each level has a different gameplay focus. One moment you're brawling with your fellow inmates and requesting shivs to assert dominance, the next you're stealthing or pew-pewing enemies with reckless abandon. The game is also teeming with atmosphere, and the world of Riddick, played by none other than the D&D loving and adorable tree man himself, Vin Diesel, has its own unique, gritty, futuristic setting. It also helps that the graphics were some of the best at the time, especially with how it uses lighting to give its dark look. A very novel game that a lot of FPS fans got to enjoy, not to mention the sheer number of high praise that it received. I very much enjoyed my session with the game, even when I missed my chance to play it back in 2004. But time is the great rival of many old video games, and Escape from Butcher Bay is definitely showing its age. With that said, there's a lot to love about many of its aspects that make it a fun retrospective visit, or, if the powers that be permit it, has the potential to be an amazing FPS remake. Even though we got to see an updated version in the Dark Athena game, that version felt more like a remaster more than a remake. So let's see what this game is all about, with a retrospective look at the Chronicles of Riddick, Escape from Butcher Bay. When you begin the game, you're greeted by the most interesting menu UI I have ever seen. Kind of feels like the default menu on the GameCube, only it's a lot more emotive and it reminds me of those pin art toys that some of you used to play as a kid. When you hit New Game, you're introduced to a cutscene that shows a very bearded Riddick, who looks kind of adorable because it's basically a fuzzy Vin Diesel. This cutscene is also cool for fans of the second film because it actually occurs a few minutes before its intro. After a short monologue with the waifu in his brain, the premise of the game's story is finally revealed. Riddick describes the events that actually led to him receiving his trademark eyes during his escape from Butcher Bay. Thus, the game takes place in the past during this exact moment. It begins with Riddick on a prison transport ship to Butcher Bay, and he's accompanied by a man named Johns, who he has a history with.
He gets one look at you, Riddick, and all is forgiven. And I bank your bounty plus 50.
Plus 50? Now come on, Johns. Greed is an ugly thing.
The banter between them sounds like some of the best prisoner/captor conversations I've ever heard. Both Vin Diesel and Cole Hauser really sell the gruffness of both their characters, and the scene feels dramatic enough that we can sense the relationship between the two. Also, it's really nice to hear Vin Diesel's voice acting, or as I like to call it, voice gravel ASMR.
Oh yeah, I forgot you don't like this part. Statistically, landings are the most dangerous.
Brother, may I have some oats?
No.
When you do land, you're off to your first bit of gameplay, getting used to the controls, as well as being able to interact and converse with NPCs.
You haven't collected on me yet, Johns.
You don't move until I say so.
You're also taught that you can knock people out from behind. Alright, just gotta knock Johns out then. Wait, what the f? What the f? That's ice cold, man. That's ice cold. So anyway, the guards start blasting, and the tutorial segment begins. Here, the player learns about each of the different gameplay segments that they'll need throughout the game. You start off with hand-to-hand combat, where you can actually perform punch combos and block when needed. It's simple and fun enough that you can mash your way to victory without having to think much about it. I could think of a few games that have improved upon this style of FPS fisticuffs, but this style of combat feels appropriate for the era. Plus, I don't think any other FPS games at the time had a combat mechanic similar to this, at least to my knowledge. Afterwards, you learn how to sneak by staying in the shadows, making you near invisible. Very similar to the Thief and Splinter Cell series, even allowing you to drag and hide bodies as well. Yahoo! Also, as long as you're sneaking, you can basically kiss their booties, and they still won't see you. Riddick also learns to traverse objects when needed, which makes the game a lot more immersive with how he can get around the environment. It's also cool how the game makes it feel a little more cinematic by placing the camera in third person to show how he's moving. It might seem slow, but the pacing of the game never made me feel like I needed to rush traversal. He's also really good with the monkey bars. There's also the famous med stations that let you heal by injecting 2 giant needles into Riddick's throat. I hope those things come with a tetanus shot, cause those look rusty as hell. Lastly, you learn how to disable armed guards when you get close to them, as well as practice some shooting with a shotgun. A fun segment overall that helps teach you all of the necessary mechanics of the game. No, don't step into the light, Riddick. Some people watch videos at night. Turns out it was just a dream, and John still gets to have some screen time. Finally arriving at the proper intro, we are introduced to Hoxie, who is the warden of Butcher Bay and the primary villain. He's a bit of a Sunday morning cartoon villain because of the way he looks and his rather humorous sounding German accent.
As of this moment, Butcher Bay owns your ass. I own your ass.
Jawohl! There's also Abbott, who is the leader of the guards, and he's played by none other than the Yo Dog himself, Exhibit.
No contraband of any kind. Don't ask what's contraband. I define it day by day.
After escorting Riddick to the title drop and towards his cell that for some reason always remains open, it was time to begin the first segment of the game, which plays like an open prison simulator with some slight FPS adventuring. The game points you in the direction of where you need to go by talking to some important NPCs, but also gives you optional quests if you talk to a few others. There's very little variety for what you have to perform, since all you can really do is beat the actual life out of people. It nets you a few rewards like getting a weapon early or a bit of cash, which you can later use down the line. It's an interesting segment because it feels like a very small adventure section for you to follow. Not much in terms of complexity and depth, but it was fun in making Riddick and the other inmates add a bit of world building to the story. After breaking out and tampering with the biometric security system that prevents inmates from using weapons, it was time for Riddick to unleash gun. Wait, what's with that aim? Riddick has a bit of trouble maintaining his aim, despite the fact that the game gives you a laser guide to help with that. I think this is by far one of the weirdest feelings to experience. On the one hand, shooting enemies and mowing them down with the weapons feels rather fun, especially because it alleviates some of the game's often slow pacing. But on the other hand, the spread is extremely wide. It kind of feels like you always have to be within shotgun licking range in order for it to be effective. Otherwise, you gotta pray to RNGesus for your shots to even connect. I didn't exactly hate it because every enemy in this section drops ammo for you to use, so I did feel a bit like Rambo in terms of just holding down the trigger and watching the bullets fly. Otherwise, that's pretty much this section. It felt like a nice shooting gallery, despite the assault rifle using antisocial rounds. After your John Rambo sequence is over, and you rage against a single guard for shooting your gun away, you end up in the sewer section for what feels like the game trying to introduce a thematic horror sequence. I say horror, but really it's just a shooting gallery for a bunch of naked men trying to come at you. Well, I suppose naked men can kind of be scary, but really it felt like a carnival shooter.
Come on, come out to the greatest show ever! Riddick with a shotgun! Throw your bodies right to him as he blasts you to oblivion!
It barely counts as being scary, but you can at least have fun sending the naked boy's body parts into different directions. As soon as you make your way out using a valve, you meet up with the Slam Preacher. He is able to stitch Riddick back up, as well as lead him to his next destination. But before he bids him farewell, he quote-unquote apparently gives Riddick one last gift. Early in the game, Riddick mentions that he gets his trademark eyeshine from the Slam Preacher, when in reality, it was actually Shira, or Shira, not sure on the pronunciation, a character that works behind the scenes in the entire franchise, that actually awakened his eyeshine. A cool reveal, and the fact that time seems to pause around Riddick when this occurs gives the game a lot more mystery with the forces at work, not to mention just more plot intrigue. Riddick now gets what are essentially just night vision goggles. While it looks cool thematically, it's really just night vision, and I kinda wish there was more to it gameplay-wise, especially with the section that we're in now. The game actually gives you the ability to turn off the lights and creep around in the dark, but the choice of wanting to stealth kill all the enemies isn't exactly enticing because you still get to use guns in this section. Not to mention, the moment you're revealed in the dark, enemies can still apparently see you. What's also kind of disappointing is how there aren't enough opportunities in this section, and a few others actually, to turn off the lights to your advantage, especially when the corridors and paths in this game are very linear, and you don't get many places to hide or sneak around. A bit of a missed opportunity to have a little more gameplay focus with the stealth mechanics. Anyway, after making Riddick Rambo further out of this section, he ends up in the security barracks to confront Abbott in order to gain access to the spaceport and leave Butcher Bay. It's funny though, you would think all this shooting in the barracks would alert everyone there, but literally the guards do not want to be disturbed.
Listen, I don't want to talk right now, okay? Who's there? I'm sleeping. Go away. Go away. I'm on vacation.
I guess they're just not paid enough. After passing what has to be the easiest lie in video game conversation history,
I got a package.
Finally, must be my new rifle. Enter.
Riddick gets access to Abbott's apartment and greets him with what feels like 4 to 5 magazine clips of the assault rifle, which is just enough to finally knock him unconscious. After a brief exchange, Johns comes in to try and collect Riddick's bounty again, only to have Hoxie come in and take them both. Riddick is then sent further into double maximum security prison down in the pits, and there he has yet another adventure with his fellow inmates. Just like the first prison section, Riddick has to complete a few quests to progress the game, but also gets the option of completing others to get various items. I think for back in the day, it was definitely an immersive experience being able to interact with all of the inmates. I do still like it, because it adds to the world-building experience of Riddick. However, the quests that they do give, again, fall under the simple get me this or kill this guy approach, so there's very little in terms of complexity and variety. There also could have been more interesting inmates to talk to, but that just might be my personal preference. After applying for the after-school fight club, where the loser basically just dies, having another fight club with security, this time round 2 with Exhibit, and finally beating him to death, Riddick travels to the mines in order to meet up with an inmate who can help both of them escape. I found this section to have a little more emphasis on stealth in certain parts. It was fun initially, but the level design isn't as intuitive with making the stealth feel approachable, and often I would just run or use the slightly overpowered taser gun. It's a stupidly fun weapon to use because you can stun guards with better accuracy than the rifle or shotgun, and you can run up to them for an instant kill stomp. It also has unlimited ammo, because... You know what? I'm not gonna question it. It's great. It's also kind of funny that it works on the giant mech guards as well, letting you stun them for a few seconds, or several if you just keep shooting at them.
Another one. Another one. Another one. Please!
After meeting up with the guy, the next step was to plant a bomb in a specific section of the mines in order to release a bunch of aliens to cause a distraction. The bomb itself is actually back in the prison section, but as you make your way back there, the game detours you to the security's base of operations, and you get to make use of a riot guard mech suit. This was easily a fun shooting gallery section, where every guard and enemy mech are at the mercy of your bullets. I liked it since it provided a nice break from all of the hiding and tasing, and you get to bully the guards. Also, whacking enemies with your beefy arms was pretty fun to watch. After finding the informant who was carrying the bomb, and the guards realizing that Riddick has returned, I had to take an alternate route to get back to the mines, which involved a bit more tasing and curb stomping. After some tram rerouting, I was finally back, and we were able to set off the bomb. Riddick unfortunately gets captured, but the alien creatures managed to break out in time to cause him to break free during the commotion. It was now time for him to get to the spaceport and get off Butcher Bay. He also seems to be into seeing people getting slaughtered by aliens.
Beautiful.
Very kinky, Riddick. Very kinky. This gameplay segment also brought back the horror theme section like before, only this time it's weird bug aliens you have to worry about. Amazing how the shotgun is the answer to every abnormal looking creature in this game. A few slugs into a bunch of bugs later, it was time for another Rambo sequence with a bunch of enemies. Plus, you actually get to be Rambo this time with the inclusion of a minigun. Though I felt more like the Heavy from TF2 admittedly. Another fun shooty section and solid action sequence. Afterwards came a mini boss fight with an even bigger mecha robot that was actually kinda fun, but not too complicated in the how to destroy them department, especially when it's blatantly obvious what's hanging from the ceiling. I then had to deal with a few more security forces before finally getting to the ship, but unfortunately the plot demands that we still stay on Butcher Bay a little while longer, and Johns wants to spend more time on his date with Riddick. Kiss me, you fool. After Ron Perlman takes a bullet to the face, and John's doing the crippled shimmy, Riddick is then sent to an even deeper maximum security location, triple level apparently. I thought this level looked pretty cool for trying to push the sci-fi aesthetic. The cleaner and futuristic looking architecture is substantially different from the older and unkept prison sections. I guess if you wanted a cleaner room, you gotta do something really bad in order to get sent to triple max security. Anyway, after realizing the fault in the security system, it's an easy way out of the prison pods, and Riddick is on the run again, thus beginning the final segment of the game. This section's gameplay is another mix of action set pieces. First, you're running from the high-tech machines, then you're shooting at guards to find an open accessway, and lastly, you're in another heavily armed mech plowing through what looks like the very top section of Butcher Bay. The mech suit is a bit on the clunkier side than the previous one that you get to pilot. At least with the first mech, you got to turn and look without any issues, whereas this big one is very stiff and has to spend time turning its legs in order to keep up with your actual head turn. It will also make some people dizzy due to the head bobbing, so you'd better be prepared to mowing down guards, and the mech suits was again kinda fun, but the movement made it feel extremely arduous. I did like the snappy remarks from the AI mech suit though, and it was always funny to hear.
Analysis suggestion. Pilot should read manual before operating this unit. Analysis suggestion. Do not walk into things. Analysis suggestion. Pilot should turn off auto battle analysis, as pilot seems to not care at all for the provided information.
It could have been a little more polished with its gameplay, but the thematic segment of Riddick going guns blazing in his final escape gets the message across. After reaching the end, Riddick has to make one more run for the docks for literally nothing, or so it seems. Johns comes to the rescue, and they hatch a plan to escape from Butcher Bay once and for all. Riddick, deciding that crashing the ship in Hoxie's office was a good idea, confronts him one last time, but not before he summons his own elite mech guard to defend him. It's another simple boss fight where you just have to take cover and unload all of the minigun's bullets into them. A bit meh as far as the final gameplay segment goes, but I guess it at least shows how pathetic and desperate Hoxie is as a villain, along with making Riddick look even more badass. Once the final mech was put down, he has one more conversation with Hoxie, which ends up with him humorously getting shot by his own security guards for mistaken identity.
Identity theft is not a joke, Jim.
Riddick and Johns board Hoxie's ship, and the game finally ends. There's also one last cinematic at the end of the credits, which acts as a preview for the second film, so more fun teasers for the fans. So as far as the game goes, it's an overall fun visit. If I were to step back into 2004, this game would have easily been one of my favorite FPSs for that year. It feels like a more fun in-your-face experience, where the scope of the action is a lot more personal and up close, compared to other shooters like Half-Life 2 or Halo 2. The entire game is a fun character set piece, where Riddick gets to have different gameplay segments to showcase how cool of an anti-hero he can be, as well as show off how badass he is. But there has been a lot of time since then, and multiple games have similar elements to Butcher Bay that they themselves improved upon. Dishonored is probably one of the best examples of its seamless use of stealth, close quarters combat, and even shooting. Deus Ex Human Revolution probably comes the closest to having a good mix of shooting and stealth segments that surpasses Butcher Bay. Though I can't really think of any other FPS games that have done hand-to-hand combat with the same mechanics, outside of maybe something like Condemned or the Elder Scrolls games. But most of all, some of the original members behind Butcher Bay, who now work at Machine Games, improved its iteration in their Wolfenstein games, where the stealth and action combat blends very well with BJ Blazkowicz. A lot of it really comes down to focus. The variety in gameplay is nice, but the segments aren't as fully fleshed out as they could have been, and it feels like they've only scratched the surface. Stealthing around Butcher Bay doesn't feel as enticing, the shooting segments, though fun, can be a bit clunky when it comes to aiming, and the mission segments aren't the most in-depth either. It definitely feels like a product of its time, and most of these portions have not aged well. That being said, it's how the game handles its amazing atmosphere and world building that really makes the adventure of Riddick still feel unique. Despite the technical shortcomings of the gameplay, all of it thematically adds to the world of Riddick and makes it feel like you're stepping into his shoes. Going around the prison and effectively dismantling it from the inside out makes him such an interesting anti-hero character. It also helps that the presentation makes Butcher Bay a very grimdark setting that feels natural to the world. This is why I think the game is such a prime candidate for a remake. You have a very interesting setting where Butcher Bay takes place, and there's a lot of characters and creatures that could potentially populate it. Though the mechanics were amazing for their time, they could be improved or expanded upon for a modern day iteration, and it would make for a very cool game. Whether or not this comes true in the future remains to be seen, and who knows whether the stories of Riddick have any interest in the gaming market. With that said, Escape from Butcher Bay was an amazing and unique game to retrospectively play, and it deserves some remake attention for a modern day audience. But that's gonna do it for today, guys. Thanks for sticking around. There will be more games to play and more videos coming soon, so please stay tuned if you'd like to see more. But for now, I will see you all next time.